This isn't really how it works, obviously, but it's not a terrible illustration of the general idea. Some of dad's info, some of mom's info, and you get a new combination that's the baby. This is Unit 12, Heredity, and we're going to see the application of what we've learned in the last 2 units.
Why are you the way that you are?
That's a good question, Michael, and that's what we're going to find out today. Why are each of us who we are and not someone else? Remember that crazy math we looked at last week about the astronomically, unthinkably huge number of possible gene combinations that could have been each of us, but we only actually get to be one of those things? We're going to dive back into that idea now. Why do some of our genes show up and some don't? Remember when we saw this picture last chapter? It's a picture of someone's chromosomes. When the DNA condenses, the chromosomes become visible, so we can actually get good pictures of them. They don't look like this and line up like this. Someone arranged the pictures with a computer, but this is what they do actually look like. Most of these chromosomes have numbers, but the last few are labeled with a gender. These are the sex chromosomes, which control what your gender is. Females have 2 copies of this right here, the X chromosome, and males have 1 X and 1 Y chromosome. So whichever your gender is determined by those 2 chromosomes alone. Notice how little the Y chromosome is. There's very little information in there. You can see that there are 2 of each chromosome, one from mom, one from dad, for all number of chromosomes 1, 2, 3, and onward, up to chromosome pair 22, all the way down here. So that's 44 chromosomes. 22 pairs of the autosomal or non-sex chromosomes give us 44 total. And these then control all of our traits that aren't gender related. The last 2 chromosomes are then the sex chromosomes, that's the X and the Y, which act as the 23rd pair, bring our total up to 46. So 22 pairs times 2 is 44 total. And these ones right here, whether you're male or female, that's going to be your 23rd pair. And that's an extra 2, so that becomes 46 total chromosomes. Let me erase that ink. Okay. In this picture now of copied chromosomes from each parent, we see the locations of different genes labeled A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. Each chromosome has the same type of information, but these chromosomes from one parent have different versions of the information compared to the version supplied by the other parent. So for gene A, one parent on the left shows an uppercase A right here, and the other parent on the right shows a lowercase a. So it's the same type of gene, it's just a different version of the gene. That can mean one parent is blonde, the other brunette. It's both people have the same type of gene, the hair color gene, but one has one color hair, one has another color hair. For gene B, we see that the left parent has a lowercase letter b, and the right parent has an uppercase b. So once again, they have the same types of genes, but just different versions of this. So this could be skin tone, this could be height, it could be anything. For genes C and D, right here, each parent has exactly the same thing. Each chromosome has an uppercase letter C and an uppercase letter D. So they would have the same version of whatever this gene is. So maybe it's eye color, if we want hair color before. Maybe this is eye color. They both have the same eye color. They both have similar ability in something that's not a physical trait, anything like that. These options for versions of genes are called alleles. Because each parent gives you a distinct copy of every gene, you always end up with 2 sets of instructions for every trait. Sometimes each parent gives you the same kind of instruction, like we see up here with C and D, both with blonde hair, both with the same eye color, whatever. And sometimes you get 2 different versions of the same gene type, like we saw with the A and B genes. So maybe one parent has blue eyes, one parent has brown eyes. Here we have 2 matching chromosomes, one from each parent. The hair color gene on each is highlighted, and we see that's in the same spot on each chromosome. It's not a random location. Over on the right, we see that mom's version of the gene, her allele, is written as a lowercase letter b, while dad's allele is an uppercase letter b. What are those big and small letters supposed to mean, though? For every gene, you may find dominant and recessive alleles. If only one version of that allele, one version of the gene, is present in a cell, then that allele will be expressed. So if both parents give you the gene for blonde hair, you're going to have blonde hair since that's the only option you're given. But if both are together in the same cell, if you had, in this case, one parent giving you a blonde hair gene, one parent giving you a brown hair gene, the dominant one will overpower the recessive one, and its version of the trait will be expressed. The recessive trait won't show up because its instructions are being ignored in favor of the dominant one. So one version of the gene will be a little bit stronger, basically. It's kind of like if you play the card game War and you just put down cards, the higher card's going to win. So one of these letters is going to win out. It's going to be the uppercase letter here. So brown hair would win out in this case if you're getting 2 of the different versions of the gene. There are two similar sounding vocab words here now. The various sets of instructions, so the genes or alleles in a person's cell, is called a genotype. The results of those instructions, what the person actually ends up looking like, what traits are actually expressed by someone, is called a phenotype. And I usually remember it this way. Genotype sounds like gene because it's which genes you have, which versions of the DNA, or the traits you have. And phenotype has a pH in it. It's like physical. It's the physical result of the genes you get from your parents. Taking a look back at these chromosomes up top, we see that the uppercase B allele from dad is dominant to mom's lowercase b allele. So brown hair is going to be dominant to blonde hair. So as long as someone has even one copy of the brown hair gene, it'll beat out the blonde hair gene, and the person won't be blonde. In order for the person to be blonde, the individual will need a blonde hair gene from both parents, so that blonde hair is the only possibility. If they're only getting the instructions for blonde hair, they will have blonde hair. If they have even one copy of the brown, it's going to be the stronger one. It's going to say, nope, this kid's going to have brown hair. We can now try to list genotype and phenotype for these kids shown here. So let's start with phenotype because we can actually see that. The phenotype on the left is blonde, and the one on the right is brown. You can see the kid on the left has blonde hair, so the phenotype is blonde. The kid on the right has brown hair, so the phenotype is brown. Do we know which alleles these kids must have inherited from their parents, though? Since blonde is a recessive trait, the only way this kid is blonde is if they received two copies of that little b. So I'm going to write right here for genotype, I'll write two little lowercase letter b's. So you'd say little b. However, the kid on the right has brown hair, so they must have at least one copy of the brown hair allele, one uppercase B, one big B on the right. We don't even know what the other allele is, since both big B, little b, if it looked like this, big B, or big B, little b, would end up with the exact same result. They're both going to give brown hair. You only need one copy of that brown hair gene for the kid to have brown hair, in this case, with the blonde as the other option. So we don't even know what this other letter is. This could be a big B as a second letter, or it could be a little b as a second letter. Doesn't really make a difference to us. They're both going to give brown hair. The only thing we're totally sure of is that to have the blonde hair, this kid on the left had to have had two little letter B's. Let's take a look at the three options for how alleles can combine here. In each of these situations here, we have an egg cell and a sperm cell combining to form a new offspring. Remember from last chapter that the sex cells are called haploid cells with half of the normal DNA amount, while the resulting zygote is a diploid cell with a full amount of 46 chromosomes. If each parent can give either a dominant or recessive allele, we only have a few possible combinations for alleles for that baby. We could get a dominant allele from each parent, in this case written as big B in the egg cell, big B in the haploid cell, which would give the zygote a big B genotype. You could also have gotten a recessive allele from each, little b in both the egg and the sperm, so the zygote's genotype is little b. Since the first two examples have both alleles the same, we said that the gene combination is homozygous, homo being the prefix for sameness. So one extra level of detail, the combination with two dominant alleles up top is going to be called homozygous dominant, which means then that the one below it, the two alleles both being recessive, is called homozygous recessive. Homozygous just means you have two of the same type of allele, and then it's, well, do you have two of the same big letters, which in case it's homozygous dominant, or do you have two of the same lowercase letter, in which case it's homozygous recessive. The third possible combination at the bottom now is one dominant and one recessive. It's the only way to do it. You either have both dominant, both recessive, or one of each. It doesn't matter here which parent gives which allele, but you wind up getting one big B and one little b. So it could be big B in the egg, big B in the little b in the sperm as you see here, or opposite. It doesn't really matter which one. But in any case, the zygote is going to be said to have a big B, little b genotype in this case. For the bottom example with these two different alleles, it's called a heterozygous combination and doesn't need any other terms. You don't need to say dominant or recessive because it always means the same thing. The bigger letter is always written first, no matter where it comes from. So you're never going to see little b, big B. It would never look like this, for instance. You're always going to write the big one first because that, again, is kind of the more powerful one. It's the dominant one. It's the one that overpowers the other. And once again, it doesn't matter which parent gave which allele. It's still going to be heterozygous no matter where they came from. So it's either both the same as big, homozygous dominant, both the same as little, homozygous recessive, or one of each, heterozygous. Let's do some practice recognizing homozygous and heterozygous genotypes. This is from the first page of your homework. In the first column, anything that's two of the same allele, two of the same letter, is homozygous, and anything that's two different alleles is heterozygous. So if I see uppercase A, I'd say that's big A, big A. I'd say that's homozygous. And it says up here, you can just write HO. I'm going to write homo, and you can do a little bit of extra detail too. They're both bigger, so I'd write homodominant. The next one, big B, little b. That's two different ones, so that's going to be heterozygous. Next one, big C, little c, also heterozygous. Two different types of alleles. And the last one, big D, that's going to be homozygous. And again, it's homozygous dominant, as opposed to, say, right here, the two little f's. This would now be homozygous recessive. Also, over here, two little n's. This would be homozygous recessive. Same thing down here, homozygous recessive. Whereas something like the J's right here, that's always going to be heterozygous. Doesn't matter where you get the big J, doesn't matter where you get the little j, it's going to be heterozygous. On the bottom part, it says, remember that phenotype is the physical result of these genes. The phenotype is just what are these individuals going to look like. In this case, it's flowers. It tells us purple flowers are dominant to white flowers. So purple would be an uppercase P, white would be a lowercase p. I hate it when P is the letter for this because you can't really tell if they're upper or lowercase until you write them right next to each other. T is much easier, like the one on the right side. But in any case, big P right here, we know that purple is dominant, so these flowers are definitely going to be purple. The phenotype will be purple phenotype. Again, pH in phenotype, pH like physical. What's it actually going to look like physically? Two uppercase genes, two dominant genes. It's definitely going to show that trait, as it will right here. When it's a big P, little p, that'll also be purple. In the third example, when all you have is two little p's, all you're getting are these white flowers. That's the recessive trait. So if all you're getting are the genes for white flowers, the only option is to have white flowers. Basically, the only time you're ever going to look like a recessive gene, show the recessive trait, is if you have both copies of the recessive gene. Hopefully this hasn't been too bad so far and you're not totally lost quite yet. You might imagine these ideas can go a little off the rails pretty quickly though, considering how many different genes we have controlling who we are. Take this couple here. Mom has blonde hair and blue eyes, but dad has black hair and brown eyes. How many combinations of these genes might they give to their children? Is one combination more likely to happen than the other? Is it more likely that a kid might end up with, say, blonde hair and brown eyes as opposed to black hair and blue eyes, or any combination of the two? They could look just like their parents even. Is it all random how the kids might look? We're going to try and figure that out. We've been talking the last few weeks about genetics, and while DNA discoveries in the mid-20th century onward have gotten all of our attention, the ideas behind how heredity works are older than that. This is Gregor Mendel. He was a monk in Austria in the late 1800s who liked to grow pea plants, and he noticed these differences in how the peas looked. Have you ever eaten peas and seen that some are round while others are much more misshapen and kind of wrinkly? Mendel saw these differences on the same plant, even within the same pea pod, and it made him curious about what caused this. So he set up a long series of experiments where he controlled how the pea plants reproduced. He made a lot of observations and took really detailed notes for a long time, and what he saw led him to come up with the idea of dominant recessive traits. He knew nothing about DNA. That would be a long time for anyone who had any clue what was going on with that. But he knew that there was something giving instructions for what the peas would look like. And he used math to accurately predict the probabilities of what his plants would look like long before they ever even sprouted. And if you've ever been in a classroom anywhere in the building and seen a tiny little person, it looks almost like a little bobblehead, but it's only about 2 inches tall, hanging from a little chalkboard with the hook anywhere in a classroom. I think there's one last I saw, one of the history class on the 3rd floor. That's a tiny little Gregor Mendel. And if we were still in class right now, you'd all be receiving a tiny little Gregor Mendel keychain. So unfortunately, that's one more thing that's been taken from us. We're going to use a visualization tool here called a Punnett square. The main part of the square is these 4 boxes, which will each represent the gene combinations of 4 potential offspring. So right here, 4 boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4. With the starting genes of the parents on the outside of the boxes. So we've got the one parent's genes up here, big B, little b, and another one over here, also big B, little b. In this example, we're told that purple flower color is dominant to white flower color, which is going to be recessive. Purple is a big letter B, and white is a little letter b. And just to point out, in every example you might see, it could be totally different. These are often just kind of arbitrary letters someone assigned who was writing the question. Before we saw in the other example that purple was a P, and a big P, little p. Doesn't matter. In this one, big P is purple, big B is purple, little b is white. But that's just this example. The female flower alleles in this Punnett square are written on the left, right here. There's the female genes over here, and the male flower alleles are on top. So this is just as animals have parents, flowers have parents too. They reproduce sexually, even though they're plants. And we can see that each of them has a big B and a little b. So each plant is going to be heterozygous for flower color. And because at least one dominant big B is present, each parent will show purple flower. So in this picture right here, we see that the male flower is purple because it has one big B that would make it purple. And the female the same way. We see the picture of the purple flower because there's at least one B. But we see each of these parents also has one of the lowercase b's, so they're heterozygous for their flower colors. And now we really just want to kind of cross them and see what's going to happen. For the offspring flowers, we're going to go by rows and columns to see the possible combinations of parent genes. So in this first box right here, the yellow one, we're going to get the possibility of the mother giving a uppercase B and the father plant giving a uppercase B. So that possible combination would be an offspring flower with two big B's. In the top right, it would still be the row where the mother might give an uppercase B, a big B, but the father now might give a lowercase little b. So this one would now be big B, little b. And we're going to proceed like that. Just see where these letters kind of match up. On the bottom left, it would be where mom's little b matches up with dad's big B. So the offspring would be big B, little b. Remember, you write the uppercase letter first. And the bottom right is where each parent would be giving potentially a little b. So this would be a little b combination. So now let's go and answer our questions. This first question says, which genotypes are the parents, or what genotypes are the parents? Parents, remember the genotypes is what letters they have. So each of the parents is going to be big B, little b. Big B right there, little b right there. So the only possible combination for the genotypes is big B, little b, because both parents have the exact same genotype. Next one says, what genotypes are the offspring? In this one, we have a couple of examples here, a couple of options. So of these four potential offspring, doesn't mean this is what they will look like, but these are the chances of what the probabilities of what their offspring flowers will look like. One of the four would be big B, big B. Two of them right here now could be big B, little b. And we see at the bottom right here a 1 in 4 chance of having little b, little b. Next question says, what phenotypes are the offspring? Well, anywhere we see at least one big letter B, it's going to be purple. You can see that in the picture. This one actually has a picture for us. Usually you don't see that. So we could have either purple flowers. That's not how you spell purple. There we go. Purple. Or white flowers. Which flowers are homozygous or heterozygous? Remember that homozygous is when you have two of the same letter. Heterozygous is when you have two different letters. So this one on the top left with two big B's and this one on the bottom right with two little b's, they're going to be homozygous. I'll just write that over here. Big B are homozygous, and the little b are homozygous. The heterozygous ones are these two over here, where it's a big and a little, big and a little. Those are the heterozygous. They have two different versions of the allele. This one's a little bit different. It just says use the Punnett square to find the probability percentage that a baby will be a boy. So what genes can mom give? What genes can dad give? If you remember back when I said before, female versus male, females have X and X chromosomes for the sex chromosomes, where male have X and Y for their sex chromosomes. So that's what we're going to write here. For mom only has X chromosomes, so mom can give only X chromosomes to her potential children, where dad might give an X chromosome or dad might give a Y chromosome. So those are going to be our combinations. Let's fill it in. The top left, we get an X from mom and an X from dad. Top right, mom gives that same X, or dad, in this case, might give a Y. Bottom left, mom can give an X and dad can only give an X. And the bottom right, once again, mom can give an X, but dad, in this case, only gives a Y. So what's the probability? Well, I see half of them here could become female, XX, and half right here could become male, XY. So it's going to be 50% female and 50% male. Mom can only ever give an X chromosome. So really, whether you're a boy or girl, it depends which chromosome your dad gave you. So a 50-50% chance that you'll be a boy or girl, depending, did dad give an X, did dad give a Y? Okay, I'm just going to basically pause here for a second. From here on out, we're done with new stuff. So if you have done Punnett squares in the past and you understand this stuff, great. We're at 20 minutes already in this video, and I'm just doing practice for the rest of the time. I don't know how long this video is going to end up being, but I've got 4 questions ahead of me to practice these Punnett squares. So, if you want to keep doing this practice and want to watch me do this and get some experience doing this, great. Sit back, tune in, go through it on your own. If not, feel free to fast forward through and just fill things in, or say, you know what, I know what I'm doing, and just get right to the work. It's your call. But it's going to be probably about a half hour we're going total video time with this. So let's get right to this. Punnett square here. We've got in mice, brown fur big B is dominant to gray fur little b. And that's just for this question. We'll see what the next question says. It might be different. Let's try to fill in our Punnett square first. On the left side, we've got, this is female over here. We can see the little sperm cells are on top. They have little tails. It's the only way we're told. It doesn't label it otherwise. So this is the mom over here. And mom's cell right here has 2 big B's. That's 2 of the brown fur genes. So mom's color will be brown. And for dad up top, we're told his color is gray. To be gray, if gray is the recessive gene, he has to have only gray alleles. So that means dad must have 2 little b's. Now we can actually fill in our cells. Mom with only 2 big B's. The only options for mom are going to be big B, big B. The only options for dad are going to be little b, little b. So it's a little bit different way to look at this Punnett square, how this picture has it with the cells, but we're just drawing it the same way. Basically, you've got your square right here, and mom with big B on one side, dad with little b up top, and now we're just going to fill it in and see what these things look like, what these offspring might look like. Then we'll get to our questions. So top left, we got mom giving a big B, dad giving a little b. Top right, mom still with the big B, dad still with a little b. And really, all these boxes are going to look exactly the same because mom can only ever give a big B, dad can only ever give a little b. So our only options for what the offspring are going to look like are big B, little b. To our questions, what are the possible genotypes? Possible genotypes for the offspring. It says here, in the 4 offspring, the only genotypes they're ever going to have a chance to be are big B, little b. What are the possible phenotypes? Well, each one of these things has at least one uppercase big letter B, and we know that the big B is the dominant brown trait, so every one of these offspring should be brown. What percentage will be brown? That is then 100%. What percentage will be gray? 0. There's none of these things that have 2 little b's like dad does, so none of them will be able to be gray. What percent will be homozygous dominant? Do any of these offspring have 2 uppercase b's? Not one of them does, so it's going to be 0%. What percent will be homozygous recessive? Same thing. Not one of these things is 2 little b's, so it's again 0%. And what percent will be heterozygous? In this example, 100% of the offspring are heterozygous. This is the same setup as the last question, still talking about brown and gray first. When you pause it here, try to fill everything in, and then replay, restart in a second, we'll see how you did. All right, it says in mice, brown fur big B is still dominant to gray fur little b. I think the next example will be a little bit different, but we're still on this for now. So I'm just going to go fill my thing in here again. On the left side, mom still has those 2 big B's, so she's still going to have brown fur. Maybe it's the same mouse even, and this will be big B right here is the only options. But dad up top now is heterozygous. He's got a big B and a little b, so we got a little bit of different possibility here. And because he's got 1 big B, 1 little b, dad will also be brown because all he needs is one of those big letter B's to show the brown trait because it is dominant. Let's fill our letters in. We've got big B from mom, big B from dad. Big B from mom, little b in this case from dad. Big B from mom, big B from dad. And once again, big B from mom, little b from dad. So 2 hour questions. What are the possible genotypes? Well, I see 2 of them can be big B, and 2 can be big B, little b. So we have 2 options for what the genotypes would be. As for the phenotypes, every one of them has at least 1 uppercase B. So once again, the only options we've got are brown mice here. We're not going to see any gray mice. What percentage will be brown? We've got 100% because they all have at least one of the big B's, and 0% will be gray because there's no mice that look like this. There are no little b, so none of them will be gray. What percent will be homozygous dominant? Do any of our mice, any of our offspring here, have 2 Remember, homo same, dominant to big. So do any of them have two of the same uppercase letter? And we see two of those right here. That's 50% will be homozygous dominant. Are any homozygous recessive? Do we see any right here with the two little case letters? And we do not. I crossed that out first time. Let's cross out again. So 0% will be homozygous recessive. And let's go with purple. I haven't used that in color. What percent will be heterozygous? We have two right here, big B, little b. Hetero meaning different. That is the other 50% will be heterozygous with a big letter and a little letter. So fun fact, I just recorded the next slide before this one. So when you get to the next one, I'm going to sound like I'm just seeing the albino gene for the first time because I really did. I did number 4 before I did number 3. Doesn't really matter. In any case, this is another one. Normal pigment is whatever the typical color of the mouse is. Could be brown fur, black fur, whatever. Albino fur is now the recessive trait with the lowercase r. That's when it's going to have white fur. You'll hear me say this exact same thing in a minute when you go to the next slide if you're still watching this. Just I messed up and did it out of order. Doesn't really matter. Let's get to this. Dad up top has big R, little r. So you can put a big R right there, little r right there. And because he's got at least one of the uppercase, he's going to have normal fur color. Mom, it doesn't tell us anything, but it says that mom is albino, which means she has no pigment. That's the recessive trait, which means she has to have two little r's. The only way she's going to show the recessive trait is if she has two of the recessive allele. So let's fill this in. Top right, top left, dad gives an uppercase R, mom gives a little r. Top right, mom and dad both give little r's. Bottom left, dad gives an uppercase R, mom gives lowercase r. Bottom right, both give lowercase r's. Okay, what are the possible genotypes? We see an uppercase, lowercase, a big R, little r, and we see a little r, little r. As for phenotypes, these two over on the left have a big R, little r genotype, so they will have normal coloration for their phenotype. And on the right, these two have little r, so they are going to be albino. They will be the white mice. What percentage will have normal pigment? As long as you got at least one big R, you're going to be normal, so that's going to be 50%. Those are the ones on the left. And what percent will be albino? The other 50%, those are the ones on the right. What percent will be homozygous dominant? None of them are homozygous dominant. You'd have to have two big R's, and none of them have two big R's. What percentage will be homozygous recessive? That is 50%, because the two on the right side do, in fact, have two of the little recessive R's. And what percent will be heterozygous? That's the other 50%. Those are the two that are on the left side. So sorry to do this kind of out of order. You're about to see a slide where it is going to sound completely backwards because I didn't do this one first. Oh well, after that we'll be done and look at a nice picture. All right, a little bit different now. So now we've got different conditions. It's in mice now normal pigment, whatever that may be. Let's say it's black fur, brown fur, doesn't really matter. Normal pigmentation is a big R, that's the dominant trait, and it's dominant to albino fur. That's when a mouse is white, doesn't have any pigment. So whatever it normally looks like, if it has, mouse gets two of the little R gene, it'll then lose that pigment and come out looking like white fur with usually red eyes too. So let's fill this in over here. I'm just going to write normal. If it's got the big R, so mom has one big R, so she is normal colored, and dad also is going to be normal colored. Mom and dad each have one big, one little R, so mom big R here, little r right there. Let me write that big R, and dad also big R and little r. To fill my chart, my table in, my square, big R, big R. Then on the top right, we've got big R from mom, little r from dad. Bottom left, we again have big R, but this time it's dad giving it to us, and mom gives little r. So once again, we don't care where the letters come from. We're still going to write it big letter first. And the bottom right now, each parent will give a little r. So the recessive trait, recessive gene, I should say. What are the possible genotypes? Now we've got some options. We haven't seen this much variety before. So we've got one of the big R possibilities. We've got now two of the big R, little r possibilities. And we finally see down the bottom right now a little r recessive possibility. So this is the first time we've seen this in these examples we've done. What are the possible phenotypes? So we can either have normal pigment with any of these three options right here that have the big letter. We can be normal fur color. Or now, because we have one with just the two little r's, we may actually see some albino mice too. The 25% chance, 1 in 4, that will get an albino phenotype also. What percentage will have normal pigment? That was that 75%. More comfortable doing it as a fraction, feel free. 3 out of 4 will be normal. And what percentage will be albino? That's the 25%. That's that 1 in 4 in that bottom right corner. Not 1 in 4%, just 1 in 4. That'll have the albino coloration because it has 2 of the recessive allele. What percent will be homozygous dominant? What percentage of these ones will have 2 of the big R? And that's right here. That's 1 in 4. That's 25%. What percent will be homozygous recessive? That's right here. That's also 25%. And what percent will be heterozygous? Those top right and bottom left ones, 50%. This is a very traditional thing to see. This is exactly what Mendel was seeing when he was doing his math, and he was able to really, really precisely figure out these ratios, these probabilities and percentages, just by looking at these numbers, seeing the same numbers over and over again for years at a time, generation after generation of these plants. And it still holds up. It's still something we can use today. Here's the aforementioned nice picture from 2 slides ago. And yeah, why not, right? I hope you can appreciate this. This is quality. As Andy's letter to Red said at the end of Shawshank Redemption, if you've come this far and maybe you're willing to come a little further, this is from your homework page. If you listen this much, why not let's do a couple more. This is what you're going to have to do. I just give you these couple of examples because you're going to need to set up some cross on your own without being told the letter, so it's a little bit different way to look at it. This says purple flowers are dominant to white flowers in pea plants, and it doesn't give you the letters. It just basically says you can use whatever you want and asks you to set this up, so let's just do a couple of these quick. Purple flowers are dominant to white flowers. It seems like P is the natural letter to use. Like I said before, it's annoying, I think, when P's look pretty much the same, uppercase and lowercase. I just like to see it a little bit different. So I'm going to just use R here. You can use any letter you want, but big R is going to be purple, and little r's is going to be white. So I'm just going to write that right there for my own reference. And it says we're going to cross a homozygous purple. That's homozygous 2 of the same letter, and because we know it's purple, it's going to be the uppercase. So I'm just going to do that on the left. Doesn't tell us which one has to go on which side. Homozygous purple is going to be big R, big R. We're going to cross that with a homozygous white. Homozygous once more, same letters. White now we know is little r, so that means little r up top. I can then cross it, big R, little r here, big R, little r here, big R, little r, big R, little r. Done. Next one. Now cross 2 heterozygous plants for flower color. This is the same system you just used. So whatever letters you just use up top, use the exact same ones right here. Heterozygous. Heterozygous means 2 different letters. So I'm using R's. So I'm going to do big R, little r, cross with big R, little r. So I'm going to get big R up here, big R, little r right there, another big R, and little r, little r. Just like I said before, this is our 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. We've got 25% homozygous dominant, 25% homozygous recessive, and 50% heterozygous. That's what Mendel predicted. We still see it now. 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. 1 here, 2 here, 1 there. Last question. If the mother is homozygous recessive and the father is homozygous dominant, we answer some questions. Let's fill that same thing in. Let's use the same letters we did up top. Mother homozygous recessive. So I'm going to do homozygous 2 of the same. Recessive is 2 little r's. And the father is homozygous dominant. Let me erase this ink. I'm going to set up my homozygous dominant, big R, big R. Each of these squares is going to have big R, little r. Now we can answer our questions. It says, what are the genotypes of the parents? Genotypes for big R, and little r, little r. Write the genotype probabilities. Well, I see here we've got 100% of these are big R, little r. It's the only option because the dad can only give big R's, mom can only give little r's. So every one of the offspring rather is going to be big R, little r. And the phenotype probabilities. What are the babies going to look like? If every one of them has at least one of these big R's right there, every one of them is going to be dominant. If we're going, assuming it's the same traits as up top, it's going to be purple. So 100% of these will be purple. Question doesn't really specify, but let's assume it's the same thing as up top. All right, if you hung around, thank you for watching this whole thing. Go now and finish the forum for today. And then I gave you a couple worksheets. I did some of them with you already earlier, but it's not that much. I think it's barely 3 sheets of just those same little Punnett square things, same thing over and over again. The one paper we did was just to fill in homozygous or heterozygous. That'll be quick. This is going to be due next Tuesday. So now, as I said in my email the other day, I'm changing the schedule a bit. It was always stuff due on Monday. Now it's going to be things due on Tuesday nights. Because I've got office hours Monday at 10 a.m., I'll then have extra help on Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon with new work given out Wednesdays and Fridays. I know that's a little confusing. I'm still figuring out myself. I'm getting used to this newer schedule. But I'm posting this up on Wednesday, so you will have extra help tomorrow, Thursday, if you need any help with any of this stuff. And then I'll give you more work on Friday with office hours the following Monday, and then another extra help on Tuesday before the work is due that night on Tuesday. Lots of little ovals drawn all over my screen now. Hopefully that makes sense. See you in a couple of days. Let me know if you have any questions, and come to Extra Help.